about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis the 13th. Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head. My real top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pepping America overseas. Pension for the workers, nigga please. Embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement. I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut. Foreclose a big close out the tenement. I twist words like a speech impediment. I hope you got good credit, bitch. If not, better get a new job with benefits. While I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with. New money buys brand new carrots. My old money bunch of great grandparents. You got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya. I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is your host, Chris J. And tonight we are talking about the situation in Ukraine, this very serious situation that's unfolded over the last 2 and about 8 months. 2 and 8 months years that we've seen this fighting go on. What seems to be practically at this point, a conflict that doesn't really quite end, but hasn't really quite, it seems like they get close to peace and the trees fall apart, and you have two sides, the West Ukrainian and the East Ukrainian. They call the West Ukrainian government is the one that's recognized by the United States and most Western countries as to be the legitimate government of Ukraine. The East Ukrainian government that's centered out of the Donbass region, Donetsk and Lugansk, is recognized by a few countries. However, they do receive support from a lot more countries. The question that comes about this war is what's the ultimate end. Is there's possibility that Ukraine is going to be separated into two countries, similar to what happened to Germany, and there'll be a West and East Germany. There'll be a West and East Ukraine, possibly even with a Kiev wall might be built. It's really a sign of the new Cold War that's formed, is this Ukrainian conflict, and it's been going on ever since the Euromaidan happened. A little after Euromaidan happened, the East Ukrainians started rising up against the fascist government in West Ukraine, and this uprising up in the Donbass resulted from feelings of being ethnically discriminated against, the perception of the suppression of the Russian language in the country, and also the feeling that the West Ukrainian government was working for all kinds of other governments, despite the fact that they call themselves nationalists. A lot of the support behind the West Ukrainian coup was because of the nationalist sentiments inside the country, but now they have a government that's betrayed Ukraine and is selling off a lot of the country to foreign governments. When you look at Euromaidan, when it happened, is that Euromaidan was supported by Svoboda, Right Sector, and a few other political parties. However, when you look at the faces of these parties, Svoboda being what you could call, at one point they screamed fascist slogans, and at the same time though they were anti-Israel, and then once they became the party in charge, now they're pro-Israel. It's funny how that they flipped once they became a American ally and received a lot of money from the United States. And they're the second biggest financer of West Ukraine is Israel, which is, really shows, and it's one of these things that people if you were to point out the Nazi-Zionist connection via the transfer agreement and many other things like that, they would call you crazy. But there's a modern example of Zionism and Nazism working together, and it's right there with that West Ukrainian government. Poroshenko and Netanyahu are pretty decent allies. And Poroshenko, while many say that he himself is not a fascist, I would say by all means he really is a fascist. And he's actually, when you look at it, he's an oligarch that turned into the leader of a country, which is really like the definition of fascism, because fascism is the merger of corporate and state power. So he walked right from corporate to state, and now that's where you have Poroshenko in power. Poroshenko has been the president since his election in May 2014. Before that, there was an interim government after the coup happened in February 2014. The coup happened. It was called the media in the United States called a popular uprising, called a lot of other things. But what really happened during Euromaidan is that a lot of people were duped by this at-large government. I guess may not at-large be the best term, but may the wanting these people that were looking towards being the government of Ukraine, and then they used a lot of these gullible people in order to fight against Yankovic, which Yankovic wasn't perfect as a leader, of course, but what took place afterwards is the replacement of Yankovic with these fascists, and Poroshenko, who has unleashed a fury against the people of his own people, really, or what he claims to be his own people, over there in East Ukraine. Now, East Ukraine has been fighting potentially, the question is, what's the goal? Is for, just to become a greater autonomy over there in the East Ukrainian regions? Is it for, I think that's not an answer, but, that's a potential concession, or the total independence of the region, or potentially the fall of the Kiev government altogether and a new start for Ukraine. Ukraine has been, ever since the Cold War ended, and they became their own country, Ukraine's been kind of caught between American influence and these kind of and then there was Yankovic, who was a semi-pro-Russian leader. I would say he was mildly pro-Russian. And when he was overthrown, he actually wanted to join the Eurasian Union, which is Putin's economic bloc that he's building across Eastern Europe, with Belarus, also a couple Central Asian countries. But Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and I believe soon to be Kazakhstan. This economic union would have had Ukraine if Euromaidan not happened, but now Ukraine is wanting to become a European Union member. And now that Poroshenko wants to be in the, now he's trying to totally bring Ukraine into the Western Europe sphere. A lot of the Ukrainians are very upset about that, and also a lot of Ukrainians were never in support of the coup, and now they see what is happening to their brothers just a few hundred miles away in East Ukraine, and they're not happy about that either. So there's a lot of discontent, not just, of course, in East Ukraine, where they're actually fighting against Poroshenko's government, but in West Ukraine, where there's a lot of popular sentiment against Poroshenko's government. And what we've actually seen in the last few months, I've noticed, is there seems to be a lot of discontent just for the way that the European Union has done things, and also America's allied governments have done things. We've had protests in South Korea. We've had a massive discontent with the Hollande government in France. We've had the United Kingdom and a lot of people voicing we had the austerity protests not that long ago in the United Kingdom, and we have also you see what happened in Spain with the potential of Podemos, which is an anti-imperialist it's actually would be for once actually helping the pro-Latin American governments rather than trying to interfere with the pro-Latin American governments, and the I guess you could say is an anti-Western party could take over Spain. We have also going on in a few other countries that we have Germany, a lot of discontent with the Merkel government. Now, is that discontent good? The people that might result from this, from who might become the power next, possibly not, because a lot of people would be duped probably by what the AFD is, which the AFD, what I've researched, the AFD kind of operates similar to how Sabloida and Right Sector duped the Ukrainian people into supporting their party because they claim to be nationalists and they claim to be representing the people's interest in the country. But really, what they represent is hate, and they actually, in the supposed anti-Israel stance that you think they would have, is not there. They're actually pro-Israel. AFD is pro-Israel, and so is Svoboda and Right Sector, at least it became pro-Israel. And I think they always were pro-Israel. Same thing with AFD is that they're pro-Israel. So Israel would still win with an AFD victory in Germany when Merkel's next elections come up, which I think is next year. You go over to Greece, I believe Golden Dawn is a similar thing to these, to Svoboda and Right Sector. The thing is that what we have is ultimately a fake nationalist front that seems to be building across Europe, and these parties that focus mainly around Muslim immigration, but don't talk about Israel siphoning the military aid of all these countries, Israel using European countries and really using the United States, and not talking about the very dangerous policy that these European governments have taken with how they operate in the Middle East, which ultimately is doing Israel's bidding in Syria and with Iran. And rather they talk about the results, and they scare everyone with the results of these terrible policies. These wars in Syria and Libya have led to the flooding of refugees into Europe, and this is what these parties scare them of, the results, but they don't scare them. They don't tell them. They'll still be in support of the cause. The nationalists of Europe, for the most part, and I'm not saying all of them, but the nationalists of Europe have become heavily diluted, obviously, and then the other nationalists inside of Europe are just playing on Nazis, which does no good, because it's like what you see is that in Ukraine you have people that are just playing out Nazis. I think that and that's the thing, is that, again, like I said, Zionism, Nazism can work together. So I could see, even with these parties that you hear in the media right now calling Nazis, I could still see Israel working with these countries when this party takes over, potentially takes over in whatever country. I don't think, in Germany, I'm not so sure that the AfD will even get close to taking power, because they don't have a lot of representation in the Bundestag, and Merkel has like 60-something% of the country still supports her, according to polls, which I know that could be exaggerated, but still, I don't think it's nearly like what you have in France, where like 12% still support Hollande. He's one of the least popular presidents in the entire world. It's almost certain that he's not going to. I know he's not going to be. He's not running again, but it's almost certain that a similar candidate won't win, because they're so tired right there in France, especially when they've had three major terrorist attacks I can think of. They had the Charlie Hebdo attack. They had the November 13th attack, and then they had the one with the guy driving all into the people over there in the summer. And what it is that either A, these were false flags by the French government in order to keep people behind the stupid war in Syria that the French have been a big part of. B, these are actual spillover attacks from ISIS, that by supporting ISIS, these terrorists come over, and then a couple of them do terror attacks in the countries that they're financed by. Or C, well, financed by the governments of those countries and not financed by the people of those countries, or at least not with their approval, probably with their tax dollars, but not with their approval. C, that the government let them do this to continue the lockdown. Like what happened after the November 13th attacks, there was a big lockdown in the country. Europe, in general, is locking down, and Europe is completely changing. And the whole European Union, this is another thing that people really don't like about modern-day Europe, and this is why so many Europeans are so frustrated, is that they feel their liberties slipping away just like Americans are losing their liberties, and their country turning into a giant surveillance state. But it's in all their countries. And also they feel like their governments are doing stupid decisions that have no benefit for them, because it doesn't have any benefit for them. It has benefits for the bankers that finance these governments. We talk about the United Kingdom's government, which ultimately the United Kingdom's government ran from the shadows by the Queen and the monarchy. The French government that you have right now, these idiots that Hollande and others. Merkel's government, the same crap. Merkel's government, it's another thing is that Germans, I think, are a little bit annoyed that they're being, their government is financing a Nazi regime inside of West Ukraine, and they're getting lied to left and right by their media. No politicians telling the truth. That's really the main thing. No politicians telling the truth, and but the whole, there's a lot of problems right now in Germany, but if the AFD can point it all to the refugees and tell the Germans that the refugees are the sole problem of Germany, and once we push the refugees out of the country, and then they win over the people, they'll just have a controlled opposition have taken over, and the Germans are going to believe that they actually have done a significant change. I know that Germany's probably a very high priority when it comes to the elites. They don't want to lose Germany to people that don't belong to them. So I know that they're going to put a little bit more effort made into keeping Germany, not allowing the German people to revolt. They've had some history, I guess, as you could say, with Germany. When it comes to World War I being, German monarchy, I say that there's been some previous governments that I don't think worked with the bankers in Germany, and that's probably why they work so hard today into keeping the German government controlled. And how this all relates back to Ukraine is that really what you're seeing right now is like a power struggle between the European Union, the Europe of the 90s, and the Europe of the past, and the Europe of the future, and these people that want to completely want to go towards a pro-Russian circle. They want to be part of BRICS. They don't want to be part of the EU. I know there's these idealists that think, well, maybe perhaps that they don't need to be part of either the EU or BRICS. But when it comes down to reality, BRICS and European Union BRICS are the two existing economic blocks when it comes to Europe. Ultimately, a government's going to have to pick one or the other, and the European Union totally screws you over because it's a banker-owned New World Order invention. Or you can go to the Russian, built by sovereign governments, and it's also with fair loans and fair rules for countries that won't put a country, because the goal is not to put countries in debt, but rather to establish partnerships. Unlike the EU's plan is to keep people in perpetual debt, because that's what the bankers' game is, it's perpetual debt. Because perpetual debt means ownership. And that's what they do in the United States with the Federal Reserve, is that they have us in such high debt. You have Donald Trump talking about how we're going to be able to someday pay for this gigantic debt that we have. What was it? We're at $20 trillion, apparently, in debt. And, he's talking about reducing it when people actually believe that. There's no way that the debt is going back. The debt is there to keep Americans paying to the bankers, and they can keep making more and more money, and to keep ownership of our country. They control the printing of your own money. So you think that a candidate is going to be able to fix the debt? Is going to fix the economy? That's a big one. Is that people believe that this tanking economy with a potential double dip looming, they think that Trump's going to bring us away from that, and it's completely false. And Hillary Clinton would have been the same thing. And right now, I see all this drama right now about this Hillary Clinton recount or whatnot, and people actually caring about which one of these scumbags is going to be our next corporate spokesman of America, is what I call it, because they just they talk on behalf of the banks and the corporations. They are just like the just like in Mussolini's Italy. They had the Union of Fascist Corporations. What was that? It was a organization that represented all the corporations inside of Italy, and it replaced the parliament. The thing is that they never officially went to fascism in this country, but what they did is that they officially they've officially allowed money to start talking when they put the Citizens United. That was really a big step to saying, hey, your votes don't really matter. It's about the money in this country, and the top super rich corporations are going to have all the say in the government. And people actually still believe that this is a function of democracy, that we actually have a voice in this country, and that the poor people are not being smashed down by the oppressive boots of the bankers, of the corporations, of the politicians. And also another boot that is coming down on Europe right now from the same from the New World Order. And right now, all these Europeans now they realize that boot's on them, and they're screaming to get that boot off of them. They're trying to push that boot away. But the thing is that whether they pick the right option and they all together lift that boot off, or they start blaming. They'll start blaming the people that were on top of them, trying to get the boot off as well. The guy at the top of the boot tells you, "Hey, those guys are the ones that are squishing you. Worry about them." And, that's the refugees. It's whoever they tell them to blame. Right now, a lot of the world is realizing that this heinous entity has had a stranglehold on a lot of countries for a long time. It's been the reason why we've had this horrible economic inequality in this country. 400 people have 80% of the country's wealth. You have people in this country starving, freezing to death tonight. In Detroit, Chicago, other cities. And you actually believe, and this is the thing, is that this is why there was all this vast support for Donald Trump in this country, because they hear Donald Trump's appeal, they hear Donald Trump talking in a way they believe they'll bring the jobs and bring those people back to jobs rather than right now freezing to death in whatever city or starving, not knowing where they're going to get their last meal, and living in places, these horrible places where you're in trouble, you call the cops don't come because there's no more money for these cities. Our country going bankrupt, our infrastructure going bankrupt. And also, what are we doing right now? We're giving $5 billion to Israel annually. That's like a flat pay. That doesn't even count all the bonus packages for what? Them doing nothing to help the American people. Them doing nothing to help us. What are they doing? They are using that money to continue their thriving economy while we suffer over here in this country. They, over there, are living a very nice life. The average, what we are giving right now was $5 billion annually. There's only 6 million people in that country. It'd be like every single person getting the equivalent of $800, but it's all going to the political elites, of course, over there in Israel. And I, for one, I say that what is happening, what these people are doing, what our governments are doing, and spending all this money to what they're doing, to the horrible things that are being done in Ukraine. We have these East Ukrainian people that are fighting for just their country has been stolen from them by these oligarchs, these terrible people that are now in charge of Kiev. Kiev used to be Kiev then used to be a center of the politicians that make it pretty much any problem that now the West Ukrainian government has, it's Russia's fault. Russia's doing this, Russia's doing that, and they keep telling them that they keep trying to convince us that Russia has invaded their country, Russia's interfering here, Russia's doing this. But the truth is that Russia's not the ones that killed those civilians in Odessa. Those motherfuckers in Kiev are the ones who ordered that killing in Odessa, where pregnant women were fucking killed. Those bastards did it. Over there in Kiev, those assholes did it. These people financed by Israel, financed by United States, and ultimately, this is not, and people might hear about this, this is not just one country that's like this, the West Ukrainian government. They're just like their financiers. You see what in Israel, what they do to the Palestinian people. They don't even allow them water, nothing. Niawa. They don't allow them. They don't allow the food to come in. They're walled behind a giant wall. You hear about Donald Trump and the potential wall they might want to build with Mexico. There's already a wall over there in Israel, the apartheid wall that blocks away the Palestinians so they can't go over to Israel where there's jobs and stuff like that. Over there in Palestine, they live in, calling it a prison is too good to call for what these conditions are over there. It's an open air prison without any of the necessities that you get in a prison. You get 3 hots and a cot in prison. These people are getting none of that shit. They're getting 3 knots and a sandbag. That's what these people are getting over there in Palestine. It's horrific. It's horrific. Or not even a sandbag. They're sleeping on sleeping on the rubble of their house that was attacked by settlers. You have these people coming in there as nut jobs, come in there with machine guns and start killing people and taking over sectors of the Palestinian land, and it's getting more spotted until eventually there won't be anything really left of the West Bank. And Gaza's a little tiny strip. There's one little city in there, the Gaza City, and every time they go and bomb Gaza, when Israel comes in to bomb Gaza, tons of people are killed because they're all put into a little area. And America, it's like in Europe, the people are standing up. You have these big riots now. It's like they over there might not exactly know who's behind the boot, but they know that the boot's there. Here in America, Americans don't know that the boot's there. They're so asleep. They're on La La Land. They're on Snapchat. They're on Instagram. And this is, and to the young people right now that I've tried to convince over the time, I try to tell them, and they act like I'm the bad guy for trying to wake them up to the reality that they're living in, and to the future that they'll see. People believe, oh, there's no way that the United States will go into Syria and Iran. Bull fucking shit. Because you know what? That's what people said about Iraq in 2002. And guess what happened? We went into Iraq, and America got involved itself in a terrible war. Was the fourth biggest military in the world at that time. And I'll tell you something about that. Is that military is nothing compared to Iran's military. If America attacks Iran, it is World War fucking III. And they'll have the rightful reason if we go into Syria, because that is their closest ally. And they have to protect their closest ally. The United States will be the ones that instigated, not Iran. Iran didn't kill Israel's nuclear scientists, but Israel killed their nuclear scientists. By the way, talk about the nuclear program. Who was the one that built the nuclear program illegally in the 1960s? Oh wait, it wasn't Iran. And in fact, that then they were controlled by a fascist dictatorship that was supported by the United States, but Israel that was controlled by same motherfuckers that run the country now. And also, it just happens then when after JFK wanted to order the monitors to go to the Nimona nuclear plant, oh wait, he got assassinated. Just maybe one of the many reasons he got assassinated, but there's another reason right there. And also the speech about the secret societies and other stuff that he did. JFK, list of things that probably led to JFK's assassinations, pretty large. That was one of the things right there, is the Nimona nuclear plant. But people still believe that the Cubans did it. Talk about Cuba. There's actually people that actually believe the Cuban government was behind the assassinations. That's the conspiracy. That's not the conspiracy. The conspiracy is the guys at the head of that boot that is oppressing on the United States, where JFK was trying to cut off that boot off the United States, and he actually successfully did it by ending the Fed, ordering to end the Fed. But guess what? They took him out. They fucking assassinated him. And I'm going to the chat right now and see what's going on there. It's taking a second to load here. And I, of course, have gotten a little bit, gone into a little bit of rant mode here. But, it's like people don't listen. People I try to convince in person, and send messages and stuff like that about all that. And I'm looking right now at there's actually somebody that I think that would be in the chat room today, but it's kind of sucks not there. I'm looking is that this terrible this terrible sleep, this terrible slumber that a lot of Americans in right now. It's terrible. They've been so distracted by everything else, from Kardashians to the NFL. They're not paying attention to politics. They're not paying attention to they're not paying attention, like I said, to the Israel $5 billion that's going to them annually. And what they do, they don't do anything for the American people. Also, you see how they talk about us, and they don't talk about us in a very, very friendly way. Europe is a little bit different. I know that the people at least know that boot is there, and they do care. But here in the United States, it's American people are so American people have become very very complacent and very they don't even know anything of what's going on right now. They don't know what the New World Order is. They don't know who the Rothschild family is. They don't know any of that. And they believe, every time they believe that the democracy next time will be better. Next time it won't be Trump. Next time it'll be somebody better. I already see this talk about 2020, and it's annoying. You see about the people actually, it's like, oh, we didn't get Sanders in this time, but we'll get Tulsi Gabbard. That's the one they're already talking about. And it's going to keep them hopeful, and hopeful enough to avoid revolution in this country, a much-awaited revolution in this country. Because those people all around the world are saying, like, hey, one of those Americans is going to finally revolt against the corrupt government. But no, they're just going to wait until 2020 so they can vote Tulsi Gabbard in, and they'll be disappointed when Tulsi Gabbard's not even voted in. They'll just put in Trump for a second term. Then probably Rubio's up next in 2024. That's my little prediction. That'll be Trump. Rubio will be the next president. And also, remember, martial law will be enacted, but they'll still have the show elections to keep people in line and people from getting too discontented from what's going on. And then after that, I think after Marco Rubio might be somebody that we don't know yet, honestly. I could see maybe at that time, as we get closer to what I would say is the ultimate face-off between the United States and Russia. And yes, I have it kind of far down the road, a little bit further than a lot of people's predictions, is I just going off of what I see Russia showing a lot of restraint in Ukraine shows to me that they probably are going to show similar restraint with whatever more United States provocations that we might see. I would say May after Rubio, we might see it's potential. There was one I forgot that I saw somebody's son or something like that. Maybe one of Trump's sons. I don't think actually the Trump family is going to be used again. I think it's just for this one-time thing that the Trump family will be. And also, I do think 100% that they're part of the plan. I don't think that Trump was some kind of roadblock that they didn't expect. This was part of the plan, and it's partially to keep people in line. Hillary Clinton was becoming heavily unpopular, and Trump is the more popular candidate, and it keeps people hopeful because, like I said, is that starving, that freezing person in Detroit, they believe that he'll bring back the job, so he'll be at work rather than starving or freezing or living in these terrible cities where they don't even have the money for the police. They have no infrastructure, and the infrastructure is crumbling in this country, and the Israelis are getting this huge amount of money in order. I keep mentioning it, but it's very important. It's one of the major things that needs to be discussed. Because it costs this country so much money. But like I said, is that the world knows. The world knows about the world's starting to wake up to the boot that's on that's now stepping on that's now stepping on the Western European countries, this South American country, or America, and a few South American countries, which is feeling tighter and tighter as people fall into more and more poverty. We have poverty increasing in this country. In fact, we have the number of people that are living on $2 or less in the United States has quadrupled since 1996. And I can imagine that most of these people that they're talking about, $2 or less, these are homeless people. $2 doesn't even buy you a large soda. I don't even know how you spend $2 or less. So there's a lot of rummaging, going through trash, begging for food, that kind of stuff. Because to spend less than $2, it really comes down to just your food, and your food. A lot of that food's going to be free. It's also, when you can't even afford to feed yourself. In a lot of countries, that's called abstract poverty, and they have serious problems with abstract poverty in some countries, such as Colombia, here in this hemisphere, and in African countries, and many countries that have problems with abstract poverty. And while maybe we don't call it abstract poverty, poverty in general has became a big part of this country, and the severeness of this poverty in some parts has gotten alarming, as we've seen that through these Midwestern cities, is that we've seen sites that usually you would see in Mexico or Colombia, but you didn't used to see in the United States. As our country gets closer to a potential double dip and a double dip recession and a dollar collapse, which I can imagine isn't too far away. Just considering the economics predictions, it's like every economist. A lot of economists have that aren't biased, that aren't on the trying to protect the Wall Street system, predict that America is going to be going towards a dollar collapse, because the dollar is backed by people trading oil in it, and people aren't trading oil in it anymore. It's ultimately the Federal Reserve note, it should be called. The Federal Reserve note is printed by a private bank. They charge our government, who gives us the bill via the IRS, and we keep paying for our currency to be printed. Us taxpayers are paying our money to the Federal Reserve, which are the elites, these bankers, which one of these bankers' families, the ones that control the Federal Reserve, the Rothschilds. That's where your taxpayer dollars are going to. The Rothschilds have control of a lot of the world's central banks across the world. And, I find it weird how the Rothschilds have been turned into Nazi propaganda. People think that you mention the Rothschilds, you're mentioning Nazi propaganda. I see people from, I would say, the social justice warrior left that are saying that the Rothschilds conspiracy are Nazi propaganda, that's Goebbels trying to distract us, from the real issue, capitalism, which, here's how I'll put it, is that the Rothschilds are the head of the problem of the economic system, which is corporatism. Which corporatism is a devolved version of capitalism, but it's not the same system. Because corporatism is where the government and the corporations rig the economy to make sure that they can get the most amount of money, while capitalism is where a free market exists, where there is no government rules and everybody has an equal opportunity, at least until the big corporations find a way to levy their influence and close out and push away the competition. So capitalism is, however, a different system. But to say that capitalism doesn't devolve into corporatism, or that capitalism can't devolve into corporatism, is wrong. Because in this country, that's essentially what happened in the 1800s, is that it was a capitalist system that devolved by the 1900s into corporatism. But it is two different economic systems. And corporatism right now is the American system. It's the system of most Western countries. And the differences between that and a country that has a different economic system are pretty distinguishing. For example, Russia does not have a corporatist economic system, and in fact, as we've seen, Putin directly confront CEOs and other managers of these big companies, and it shows that the government there is ultimately a lot of times the government has almost like a kill switch, is that they'll let it go so far but when workers have been affected too much, they come in and intervene. And here in the United States, what we have is that we have the government helping corporations screw over the workers. We have our government helping eliminate sentiments of workers' rights. You know, people believe that just because we don't work a 6-day week anymore, or that we don't work 16 hours a day anymore, means that we have workers' rights. You know, the 8-hour workday were steps forward, but ultimately we've lost ground on that. Think about it. How many people you know actually do work an 8-hour workday, and that's it? No, a lot of people are working 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, and a lot of it unpaid, because we have, you know, you work 8, but then you work 4 to 6 off the clock. You know, in a lot of professional jobs, that's the way it is. And people that work in low-level retail jobs and such, well, they're ended up having to work 64 hours in order to feed their family. You know, so they're ending up working 6 days a week. So the whole 5-day week and 40-hour work week is actually not true. Or 5-day week, 8-hour day is not true. And what we really have in this country is very few actually working on that. Now, that's how it is in Russia. That's about how much they actually work. And yeah, so that's a nice thing when you think about it. That's how everyone works, and that's what you can provide a family with. But that's just enough to have a little bit of spending money. That's just enough to be able to buy maybe some food and rent. When it comes to a low-level retail job, people say, well, adults shouldn't be working. But when you have an economy that doesn't really produce a lot of jobs, and you have corporations that are looking to eliminate jobs, then it's then you have a lot of adults working those kind of jobs. In this country, we have 25% of all fast food workers have a 4-year degree or higher. Now, that's not right. Also, 56% of all fast food jobs have they have a family. 25% of all fast food workers have a 4-year college degree. You know, this is the kind of stuff that happens, you know, in third world countries. Is that, for example, in Colombia, you have people that have doctor's degrees, but are taxi drivers. So the doctor's degrees don't really pay too much. You guys can make quite a bit running a taxi. And it's also just because of the fact that there's not that many doctors in general. And also that's another, and it's also not really because they have so many that they don't know what to do with them. It's just that they don't open up many jobs to them. That's one of the failing signs of a country, is the amount of doctors to people ratio. When that gets really high, and it allows doctors to monopolize and make a few doctors get very, very rich via corrupt practices such as just, you know, handing out pharmaceuticals. And when a doctor becomes a pill pusher and a doctor becomes a salesman of pharmaceuticals, like we have in this country, doctors pushing pharmaceuticals, doctors making money, doctors making tons of money off of pharmaceuticals, doctors making their money off of pharmaceuticals. Well, you know, there's a problem, and you have you know, that's why in this country we have medical marijuana so pushed back, is because the pharmaceutical companies do whatever they can to keep doctors on board the pharmaceuticals. You know, and they know that the pharmaceuticals are bad for them because, well, they've been in school for 12 years, many of them. They know that this stuff ain't good for people. They know these are highly addictive, and they know they actually harm the body. But, you know, I'm not talking about every pharmaceutical pill that's ever been made. But I'm saying a lot of them that are being pushed on the people. You know, there's definitely some uses to pills. There's some things that need to be treated by pills, but there's a lot of, you know, things can definitely be treated by marijuana. Because this is scientific stuff. This isn't just stuff that I found off of hightimes.com. This is stuff that's pushed by medical doctors. You know, this is stuff that actually has like Harvard studies behind it. You know, recently I found out that psilocybin mushrooms has uses into treating depression. You know, there seems to be what they're finally realizing is that nature has a lot of, or not finally realizing, what they're finally accepting again, is that nature has a lot of natural remedies for things. something that we used to accept for many years, and that nature might not have a natural remedy for every, or at least that we have found yet, of all these of every disease they could think of, but for many diseases there is a natural remedy. This country, with the fact that we don't have universal health care, while every other industrial country does have it, shows the big pharmaceuticals control over our economy. That they have this country. We actually, talk about who has universal health care. Israel has universal health care. But for us, the Goyim, we don't get universal health care. We get a health care system that if you have to have heart surgery, you might pay $100,000. That's I'm talking about. Your deductible will be $100,000 if you have to have heart surgery. This country, likes to criticize on Venezuela, likes to criticize on Cuba, likes to criticize on Iran, likes to criticize on Russia, likes to criticize on Syria. But I'm pretty sure all those countries have universal health care. Now, Syria, their system is deteriorating as their country is being bombed the shit out of by a few Western powers who, they claim to be doing a humanitarian mission, but they're killing civilians. Killing civilians by the hundreds. We killed a few hundred civilians there. Oh shit! It's like we didn't mean to do that. We accidentally struck the Syrian Arab Army. There's always a fucking accident. It seems like with the American military, it always seems to be. With the American government, always has a lie that they can be pushed to their TV. Look, we didn't mean to kill. We didn't mean to kill those people in the hospital. It was an accident. We thought that was an ISIS training center. That mosque, yeah, we thought that was an ISIS training center. That grocery store, yeah, it looks like an ISIS training center. They got to train how to get groceries real fast out of a grocery store to bring back to camp. And bring back to the base to go do terrorist stuff. So we saw it naturally. That was it was a training center. Oh look, it's like. You see that soccer field? Yeah. Look, we can't let the ISIS soccer team get pretty good. They might beat the Syrian soccer team, and then they'll be in charge of the country, or the people will like them. Yeah, totally. That was a training center as well. Oh look over there. That pool over there. Yeah, that was ISIS training for to go swimming. To go swimming to Europe. Yeah, we had to strike that before they learned how to swim in Italy. They were getting pretty good, I felt like I was doing a little bit of a. That wasn't quite like the White House spokesman or whatever. That guy's fucking annoying. What is his name? I saw him. He started dogging on this RT reporter that goes there. He's like, why don't you ask Russia these same questions? Because Russia ain't doing this shit, dummy. You're the ones that are over there doing all these terrible things in Syria and have all these horribly questionable policies, and you're gonna tell us that it's like, oh yeah, you shouldn't ask us that stuff, because what you're saying is we don't have a really good answer for that, or we just have the same bullshit that we always put on the news, which you're gonna hear for the 753rd time. So yeah, you need to. Go ask Russia these questions, because we don't really want to be answering questions. We're good at giving bullshit answers, but if we give another bullshit answer here, that might not. You probably will say that's a bullshit answer and call us out on it. I think Syria and Ukraine are very comparable by the same amount of bullshit spread by the media about Syria and Ukraine. Syria has so many. I've heard so many lies about Syria, and one of the most disturbing lies is the fact that the media pushes the bullshit that this is a sectarian conflict. This is Sunni versus Shia. This is the Alawite government versus the Sunni majority of the country. Even though his military is 90% Sunni, apparently his side is all pro-Shia. And that the fact that those people that are over there that have a whole different sect are not even counted in this. They don't talk about the Wahhabis. The Wahhabis are the ones that are the Syrian opposition as we know it. These Wahhabis don't belong to Sunni nor Shia. And what they are is that they're a resultation of the British military. Resultation, that is definitely, that's not a word. They're a result of the British military way back when they wanted to cause a destabilization inside of Islam, inside of inside the Islamic world. They brought up this group, the Wahhabis, and they brought them out of the Saudi clerics started preaching this twisted version of the Quran, and it was actually, in the very beginning, it was a British plot to actually destabilize the Muslim world. And really, as you know, the ideology behind terrorism as we know today is British, and the parent group that all the terror groups as we know it pretty much today split off of it was American created, the Mujahideen, which they were created in the 1970s to fight the pro-Soviet government in Afghanistan. Terrorism, as we know it, is a UK, United States, Israel invention, and ISIS, or as it should also otherwise be said, and this one, for the people in the back of the room, it just happens that Mossad has an alternative name, otherwise known as the Israeli Secret Intelligence Services. Yeah, that's right. It just happens that there's that coincidence. And there's probably people that say, oh, there's no way there's a connection between them. There's no Zionism and Islamic terrorism have nothing to do with each other. Look, it's like people think that Zionism and Nazism has no connection to each other. Zionism and Islamic terrorism have a lot of connection to each other, as these Islamic terrorists destabilize the countries that oppose Zionism. Syria, Iran, they both oppose Zionism. And you notice this is the countries that are always criticized on the media. And on the media, the media is constantly saying that we're saying, Ahmadinejad is such a scary guy. He's totally going to launch the nukes. He's totally going to destroy Israel. Oh no, the Ayatollah is building the nuclear bombs against the United States. Oh no, the sanctions aren't working. They're getting stronger economically. We can't have that happen. You know, hear Donald Trump talking about how Iran's getting so powerful, how they're getting so rich off the Iran deal. You know, but ultimately, all they did, all the money that they really gave to them, what it was just lifting the sanctions, and then the money that flows into their country. But they haven't even done that. The United States has been violating the Iran deal. It's a total lie that Iran's been violating the Iran deal, and the United States has not been violating the Iran deal. The United States has been violating the Iran deal, and they are still punishing the poor country of Iran for not having a Rothschild central bank. And they have done that to Cuba. They've done that to Cuba for 55 years. And right now we have all these people online, this internet shitstorm that's erupted over Fidel Castro's death. But they seem to ignore the fact that Cuba did not have the Rothschild influence. And that's the reason. That it doesn't have anything to do, and I hear these people on CNN saying, oh, if Fidel Castro tried to launch, he wanted the Soviet Union to launch nukes against the United States. Oh, he was so terrible. Oh, no, Fidel Castro was a terrible dictator. He totally had tons of political prisoners. All these myths that are perpetuated, just like they perpetuated against Hugo Chavez all those years. But really, the political prisoner is just a term that they use for whatever country they don't like. You know who has political prisoners? Saudi Arabia. You know who has political prisoners? Bahrain. You know who has political prisoners? Qatar. You know who has political prisoners? South Korea. You know who has, practically all of America's allies have political prisoners. There's actual proof that they have political prisoners, not just people that were thrown away for selling cocaine, or people that did armed robbery in whatever country, and then they call these people political prisoners. Political prisoners, as in these people actually opposed the government and they were thrown in jail for it. That's what happened in Saudi Arabia, where they threw in jail the top Shia leader in prison For a long time, the Nigeria's top Shia leader was in prison. By the way, for people that didn't know, yeah, one of the most corrupt countries in Africa, one of the most corrupt countries in Africa is an American ally. Nigeria is a very strong American ally. Some of the most backwards, repressed dictatorships, including Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, which, this is a country that beheads people for opposing the Saudi regime. They stone women for adultery, and for thievery, they'll cut off your hands. This is a country that still has medieval forms of punishment. But America still has weapons deals. America still gives aid to them. And they'll call Syria's leader, they'll call Bashar al-Assad a dictator. But Bashar al-Assad, what he is loved by a big part of his people. 70% of the country support Bashar al-Assad. Also about Bashar al-Assad is that Bashar al-Assad is actually a doctor. On top, they call that doctor a dictator, and they call that and they call the Iranian leader, they call Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. They said all kinds of terrible things with him, and they kept bringing up this thing about, you denied the Holocaust, you're terrible. Also later he never was a Holocaust denier. He never said that he didn't believe the Holocaust didn't happen, or he didn't stay with that. I know that because eventually he said it happened. And also, it's one thing that they use against people that oppose Zionism to say, oh, you deny the Holocaust. They could say it against me. Even though I've never said that I've denied the Holocaust, they'll say you deny the Holocaust. And here's the thing, Americans, they just hear it and they're like, oh, that guy denied the Holocaust. And, it's one of those things like, when they figure anti-Semitic, Americans get all freaked out. They get all scared, or they call you a Nazi, and they're like, "Oh my God, that guy's a Nazi," or whatever. But ultimately, we're just, I just heard me earlier talking about Nazis and talk about how Zionists work with Nazis. But you start mentioning that, and they're just like, "Oh, that's totally bullshit." Obviously, the Zionists and Nazis don't like each other. Zionists hate Nazis, but no, Zionists have worked with Nazis in Europe a few times, and they've worked with Nazis now in West Ukraine, and they're helping the West Ukrainians slaughter the East Ukrainians. The East Ukrainian people, the people in Donbass, the people of Lugansk, the people of Donetsk, they're suffering. And these proud fighters, a lot of these people, these proud revolutionaries, they're doing it in a way. This is you call revolutionaries, but these proud fighters, they're separating from an oppressive fascist regime that has taken over West Ukraine. And unlike in Georgia, unlike in other countries, especially unlike Moldova, I believe this one will not become a frozen conflict that we've seen in the post-Soviet world. I think that eventually the East Ukrainians will get their independence as they deserve it. In Moldova, they've had the region of Transnistria has been long controlled by Moldova, and is one of those examples of a frozen post-Cold War conflict that unfortunately we have a few of in this new Cold War between the United States and Russia's influence. But I don't think this is going to be the same thing. This is going to be the Russians, the pro-Russian rebels will come through in this battle. I, for one, think that also in Georgia, the Georgia War was one of the times where the Russian intervention came to a big time to the aid of the people of a country that were fighting against oppression, and they were fighting against the con man Saakashvili. And the Russians, if the Russians were able to come into Ukraine and actually knock out the Poroshenko and his guys, that would be a great step forward. But the problem is that Poroshenko and Poroshenko and his guys are going to stay as long as the United States says that if Russia goes in there, pretty much it's World War III. We must scream out what is going on in Donbass, what is going on in Lugansk, what is going on in Donetsk. This will not go with the inaction of the American people. And the American people must wake up. We must look up what's going on. We must realize that the fact is that these people are fighting an army that has no limits on who they kill. They kill thousands of people in Ukraine, and you don't hear much about it. You don't even hear too much about Syria. You hear a bunch of lies about Syria, and the Ukraine and Syria, their wars share that same thing, is that they lie about what goes on in these countries. They said that the East Ukrainians shot down MH17. The West Ukrainians shot down MH17. Those shitheads did. Those shitheads have all the evidence against them that they shot that plane down. There were bullet holes indicating that fighter jets hit that plane with bullets when it was flying, and they killed those 296 innocent people. It was not the East Ukrainians. It was not Putin. You had all these scare tabloids, all this scare media, all across many countries, saying, telling you, well, it was in Britain, telling you that Putin killed these people. Look what Putin did. But ultimately, they shouldn't be saying look what Putin did. They should be saying, look what Poroshenko did. Look what the United States did. And July 17th and what happened on that day will never be forgotten. And the horrible thing that happened in MH17 and all the evidence. The only people that said that the East Ukrainians did was the Americans finger pointing at the beginning, saying that, and they had an answer very quickly. Oh, it was the East Ukrainian rebels. And there's all kinds of answers. Oh, why they had these missile launches in places where the East Ukrainians could even take them. Because it wasn't a Buck missile. It was fighter jets. That's what we have. We have all kinds of accounts saying, and just like Global Research actually put out a big thing about the MH17 in debunking the myth that the East Ukrainians shot down MH17. GlobalResearch.ca, if you haven't checked it out, by the way, is great. All the information that they provide, it's a great thing. It's like an encyclopedia of truth of what is actually going on. Our old mainstream media, owned by CNN, Fox, or CNN, Fox, MSNBC, owned by defensive subcontractors, billionaires, foreign royalty. As we have Prince Alwaleed owning the second biggest stake of Fox News. Supposedly, American Fox News is owned by a Saudi prince. And who also owns part of Fox News? The Australia media mogul, Rupert Murdoch. Yeah, that's right. Rupert Murdoch, owns Fox News, and we have our New York Times owned by Carlos Slim, Mexican billionaire. But where is the American people's owning of the media? Where's the American people's media? We have to go into the alternative media for that. The alternative media is the ones that are actually publishing what needs to be published. And also, what we've seen in some of the alternative media is finally some coverage about Ukraine. Finally, some coverage about what happened in Odessa. What's happened with the lies of MH17. What's happened here and what's happened there. MH17 was definitely a turning point, as they really want. The United States showed they really want to get aggressively Ukraine, and that they weren't going to. And they've been talking about this. We had so many people, and even regular people say, like, look what Putin did. He's such a shithead. Look, and they've actually had the media believing. People, they've spun things around, and the media telling you that Putin and Trump are working together. I'll tell you one thing: is that Putin and Trump are actually, is that Putin might have said some nice words about Trump, but he made it clear that he did not endorse Trump, and he's just using diplomacy, as he always does. Putin always uses diplomacy. He is not a man to quickly criticize
And he's not, he's not like Hugo Chavez, who I can imagine what he'd be saying about Trump right now. And, when he told those American ambassadors to get out of the country, that's almost the style of my ranting or something like that. Váyanse, Yankees de mierda. Por aquí tenemos un pueblo digno. Váyanse sin veces a carajo, Yankees de mierda. His speech is really full of passion. And now we have nowadays Maduro is now the president of Venezuela, and you hear all the things that are going on in Venezuela. And that's another example of the media line about the same situation, of a different situation, which is the Venezuelan situation. They keep telling you that the people are starving, the people don't have food. But I talked to my Venezuelan friend over from RNA News, Freddie Nunez, and he tells me a different story. That yes, there are some struggles, but it's definitely not to the extent of this apocalyptic scene that they keep describing on many different media channels. And also the fact is that what is going on in that country, the struggles have resulted from sanctions, it's resulted from a regional drought of oil, and it's resulted from sabotage from the CIA, who's also, people think that things are going to change right now. And I'll tell you one thing, is that the CIA is still going to be killing people all across the world. The CIA is still going to be trying to subvert the wishes of the people and trying to overthrow democratically elected governments. Assad's government had an election in 2014, and he had 88.7% of the vote. He's democratically elected. The Iranian, the Iranian government is democratically elected. These countries have elections. Venezuela definitely has elections. And in fact, Chavez was elected one time, 2000, two times, 2006, actually, one time, 1998, second, two times, 2000, three times, 2006, four times, 2012, and Maduro was elected in 2013. So the PSUV has won 5 presidential elections since 1998. This is not that they've only won 1 or 2, or, they've won many elections. And they've won many, and same thing all across the South America left has won many many elections, and now Morales won't be able to run in 2019, which sucks. But I'm sure that there'll be a competent face to win in the Bolivian election. And the difference between Venezuela and Bolivia is that Bolivia's system is much more stable, as they things are a little bit different. But Bolivia, Evo Morales is kind of like one of those figures now. What seems to be one of the remaining figures of the Latin American left, and of the original Latin American left. As we know, we now we have Castro, Chavez gone, and really the oldest one left is now Ortega, who was the guy that won with the Sandinistas in the 1980s, actually in the 1970s. Ortega has been a long-time leader in Nicaragua. Actually, so he was gone for many years. He left in the 80s and came back in 2008, and now he's been the president since. And Ortega took over a long time ago from a United States-backed dictatorship of Somoza. In South America, we had a lot of these cases where left-wing governments took over from a U.S.-backed dictatorship. It should be noted is that what I've noticed is that these nationalists of the left wing in South America actually defended their interests of the country, did not bow down to Israel, did not bow down to the bankers. They actually kicked Rothschild banks out of their countries. They actually gave their people health care and education. While the right-wing nationalists in Europe, what I've noticed is that a lot of them are, they always seem to eventually be pro-Israel. They give in to foreign investors from foreign corporations. They give into lobbying. They give into media, fake media coming from the Zionists. They are not true nationalists. And what has occurred, I guess, somewhat, is that the idea of right-wing nationalists, but also, if you go by the economic ideas, is that the right wing is going to be more open to corporations. But with a corporation is that a corporation is going to put money first instead of people. And the people of a country is what makes, putting the needs of the people of the country first is what is nationalism. And how you're going to put the needs of your country first when the corporation need for money is going to be put first. And you can't be pro-corporation and pro-people of your country at the same time. So the idea of, it seems to be somewhat of a paradox. Now, I could be, there might be ways around it, but just the thing to be put out there is that I think that definitely when it comes to the right-wing nationalists and what they're involved in Europe and what the left-wing nationalists have done in South America, it shows that they actually have been more nationalistic. And I use nationalism in a good term. I don't use nationalism, a lot of times, a lot of the people on the internet use nationalism. They say it's a root of a lot of our problems. But ultimately, it's false nationalism. False nationalism in our American people, that they believe NFL, they believe the Kardashians to be that's like the symbols of America. But or the NFL and Budweiser. But what the symbols of, but these people look past corporations screwing over our country. They look past Zionists taking away our taxpayer money. And they'll scream America, and that's fine, but they're not going to actually make steps that actually put the American people first. So what we have here is not true nationalism, and it's just a form of the internationalists believing that we are nationalists, but really, in a way, we're still falling into the internationalist globalist trap. What they have down in South America, they've actually pushed, even though that they show more solidarity with workers from around the world. This is solidarity between workers, but this is not giving up the sovereignty of your country to internationalist globalist bankers. What they are doing inside of South America is actually, in the remaining Chavista government, is that they are giving they're actually doing things that help their people. So that is actually true nationalism. That's why I see nationalism is putting the people of your country first. And that makes something a little bit clear on my, it's kind of an evolved thought, because I'm pretty sure in earlier radio shows I've said that I was not a nationalist. And I even said probably at one point I was an internationalist, but I highly reject that term internationalist, even when it means the solidarity of the workers. What I believe internationalism is putting the idea of this, is not putting your peoples of the nations first, which if you don't put the people of your nation first, I don't know how you can put people of other nations, but it's more that I feel like then you're getting into the idea of corporations, the loss of a country's sovereignty, which the loss of a country's sovereignty works into the New World agenda, so it's allowing corporate influence. And I don't like the term internationalist for the solidarity between workers of different countries, because what I've seen the definition of that term to take nowadays is a term to describe the movement towards a unitary body of power, the unipolar world, as some people call it. Some of the more the more academic term it became for the New World Order, the one Putin has used for the New World Order, and we know what he's talking about when he says unipolar world. It's not just some political term that he throws out there. It means New World Order that he's fighting against. And if anybody, I actually have Skype, and if anybody wants to, call in, actually, I have the full version of Skype. If you call in the 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296, you'll be able to chat with me here at Voice of Rebellion Radio. You can put in your 2 cents. Or if you have Skype, you can just message me on Skype. You can just your Skype name somehow. Just at Chris Jackson Rojas. It's my Skype. You can message me you just message me a request,
and saying that you want to chat on the show, and I'll be happy to bring you on. Because I haven't had chatters on here or anybody to talk to on here for a while on my radio show, and I think with maybe the charge show I've had so far, maybe I should have a little bit of a somebody to chat with and to have any voice in this debate. So I'm not just talking to myself for the show. And we are we're moving ahead on the show. We're now 10:15 Eastern time right now, and Ukraine. I was hoping to bring on at some point during the show, which is somebody I talked to and collaborate a little bit with, is Sergei Bardashov, which I'll put out his name publicly because he's doing a very good cause. He runs the humanitarian battalion, the Novorossiya Humanitarian Battalion of Ireland in the United Kingdom. He accepts donations and he gives this to the East Ukrainian people. And his organization has came through a few times. You can look up on Facebook and see the few things that the Novorossiya Humanitarian Battalion has done. And he is one of the few. That's the only humanitarian organization like that. I have a couple connections over there in East Ukraine actually, and I think that and what they tell me is that the information war is one of the big things. One of them told me the big thing is the information war, because Americans are so helplessly blind on what's going on over there in Ukraine. So this is what I'm doing. I'm breaking through the blockade, the steel curtain that Americans are living behind, which is not the steel curtain of the. Isn't that a Steelers slogan? They're not. That was just for that one commercial. I don't know. Where he's like talk about other teams losing like behind the steel curtain. Anyways, Americans living behind a steel curtain of the media, and they believe whatever the media tells them, and they became isolated because Americans have become so helplessly brainwashed by the xenophobia, and that's one of the things that, again, a false patriotism that Alston is there. Is that a true nationalist government is not xenophobic. However, it makes it clear that foreigners' interests are put behind their own people's interests. But xenophobia is a way of telling you that we need to take losses, and so that way these foreigners don't win. It's often the way that's put. You need to start losing your freedoms so the Mexicans or the Muslims don't start sabotaging our country. That's the kind of stuff that is said, and it's really a way xenophobia and the threat of the boogeyman is like, hey, we're stopping terrorist attacks. Yes, you have to spend hours in line at getting checked at the airport. Yeah, you gotta accept all these wiretaps, but you're not gonna get attacked by terrorists, right? And then people are like, yeah, so people accept the trade-off, and but the trade-off is our freedom, our liberty, and it's like what Ben Franklin said: that country, people that give up liberty for security deserve and will end up with neither. And Ben Franklin's quote, what I say about that is that I don't think they deserve, because unfortunately it's a very easy thing to fall into. It's a very easy trap, to want to fall into the safe hands of the government. The government will protect it. The government will prevent terrorism. But what they don't realize, what the American people don't realize, is that terrorism is an American invention, modern terrorism. Mujahideen was created by the United States government, or was made to be that strength by the United States government. They're the ones that gave them the Stinger missiles. And then that way they could fight the pro-Russian government in Afghanistan. And then eventually the Taliban took over. And then when the Taliban took over, eventually we go to war with Afghanistan. And then now we have all these different terror groups: Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Nusra, Islamic Front.
and they all split off that one at the beginning, the Mujahideen. The Middle East became majorly stabilized because of the United States policy in the Middle East. In Syria, Yemen's one of those forgotten wars that we don't really seem to talk about. But Yemen, we have horrible atrocities being committed by the Saudi regime. And they talk about the Houthis being terrorists. They call them all these different names. They say that the Houthis are not winning, that the Houthis are simply a violent terror group. But they are an ideological group by the will of the Yemeni people, that they wanted to overthrow that terrorist regime of Hadi that was there before. Hadi and his government were allowed the drone strike to happen on his country, allowed terror to rain down on his country, and also allowed Al-Qaeda to flourish in his country. The Houthis have kicked Al-Qaeda's ass. They have kicked ISIS's ass. Hezbollah has kicked ISIS's ass. But America calls those people terror groups, and they won't call the Free Syrian Army a terror group. The Free Syrian Army that beheads people. The Free Syrian Army that's crucified Christians. The Free Syrian Army that has been accused of using chemical weapons. They target minorities. The Free Syrian Army that has used people as human shields by hiding in these heavily populated neighborhoods, oppressing minorities, been accused of using chemical weapons, targeting minorities, and many murders. And the regime in Yemen, now the Houthis have control of the country. The Houthis have control of the country, but they have a small part of the territory controlled. The Houthis only control around Sana'a, while the Hadi government runs from Aden, which is the United States supported government that was there before. The United States supported government had been there for many years, and the people have grown very, very sick of what happened inside of Yemen. And Yemen is the poorest Middle Eastern country for a reason, and a not so rich region. Yemen is the poorest country there. Yemen has been a country that's been heavily affected by drone warfare, heavily affected by terrorism, and now people rose up in that country. In Lebanon, you have Hezbollah, which Hezbollah is all across the Middle East as a militant wing. And Hezbollah has been accused of being a terror group many times by the United States. But here's one thing about Hezbollah, is that they kick ISIS's ass. They've been a major part of the ISIS ass-kicking of ISIS inside of Syria. The ass-kicking of ISIS inside of Syria, which has been in part has happened because of Hassan Nasrallah and his army, which Hassan Nasrallah is the leader of Hezbollah and has been on RT News actually before. And pretty much what Hezbollah is for is an anti-imperialist front that opposes Zionism, that has a military wing that helps fight enemies of the people in the Middle East. As they fight, who do they fight that helps people? They fight ISIS. They fight people that are murderers. Hezbollah is supported by the Iranian Syrian government and the Houthis, and they are a major force inside of Lebanon. They have more power than their actual military inside of Lebanon. Hezbollah has in the past repelled the South Lebanon Army, which was a pro-Israel army that was there. Hezbollah has been a major part of the winning of the fight against ISIS. ISIS probably likes that the media here in the United States demonizes Hezbollah so much, and it's kind of like how they demonize the fighters in East Ukraine. The fighters of East Ukraine, they're called terrorists by the West Ukrainian government. They're called thugs by our government. You know, you hear people say, Putin's thugs take more territory in the Donbass region. Putin's thugs do this. and they can try to connect them directly to Putin and say that this is the Russians trying to annex the land. I'll tell you one thing: if the Russians really wanted to take over Ukraine, they could have done it a long time ago. The Russians have the ability to, they were able to win the Georgian War in 6 days. The Russian military could steamroll over the Poroshenko government. Even though that the Poroshenko government said, oh yeah, we're ready for war, they're not ready for war with Russia. That's something to laugh about. ISIS has said they declared war on Russia, and it's probably, it's like one of those things. It's like, yeah, it's like you can try that. You end up like Hitler's military. You can end up like Napoleon's military, and this mistake has been done many times by people thinking that they can take on Russia, and in the end they get defeated. Actually, the Russian military right now is gaining strength. And they have their new tanks, the Armada tanks. The Russian military is not something to be fucked around with, but they're not even being really used. They have a little bit of soldiers inside of Syria, and the American media made lies about it. They said, "Oh yeah, they're striking. People are not terrorists. They're killing civilians." Well, you know what? Is that you said that they're striking people that are not terrorists. You said they're striking the rebels. Well, the rebels are terrorists. There is no moderate rebels inside of Syria. And when people get past that myth here in the West, then we can make some progress. But when people still believe that there's these freedom fighters, these good guys inside of Syria, they're fighting along the opposition. As long as people believe that, there'll be no progress. It's like you can go find those moderate rebels or whatever, but the Syrian Arab army will be fighting to protect the minorities inside the country. Who's protecting the Kurdish people? Who's protecting the Christians? Who's protecting the Palestinians? Bashar al-Assad and his military. And the moderate rebels, they don't exist. The moderate rebels don't exist. The Western media is a joke to people that really know what's going on, and that the fact that, but to a lot of people, they believe this to be the ultimate source of truth. They don't believe anything they see. They'll say, "Oh, I don't believe everything I see on the internet, but I believe everything I see on TV." We have people thinking that these newscasters are geniuses. You got people that you see how they've obviously faked their stories. You had Bill O'Reilly talk about his time in the Falkland Wars made up. You had news reporters talk about their different experiences, and it's made up. It's like, remember that one time on the Gulf War, they had a stage, and they're saying that they were supposed to be in Iraq, and they were in the studio. There's been a few. This just shows how fake news is. And they'll tell you RT's propaganda. RT is Russian propaganda. RT actually has covered in a fair way about Snowden. They've covered in a fair way about Assange. They've covered in a fair way about Chavez. They covered in a fair way about Syria. And also, I'll tell you one thing, is that they covered pretty fairly Navalny, one of the Russian government's opponents. If they imagine if with Snowden, our media saying, any news channel saying something good about that. They did it. No, they said he was a traitor. They said that he sold state secrets. They were trying to say that he was working with the Russians, he was working with the Chinese, he was working with the Russians. He was working with the Russians. Remember that? The media said he was working with the Russians. The media said all kinds of lies in 2013 when he was stuck in that airport in Moscow. And if our country's still above that, why didn't they give him the Navalny treatment? Is Navalny in prison? Actually, now I'm confusing. I think Navalny did end up in prison, but RT gave him a pretty fair treatment of that. RT has shown that they're not wholly biased in favor of Putin, and even if they are reporting pro-Putin, well, there's a lot of good things to report about Putin, but there's nothing good to report about Netanyahu. There's nothing good to report about Obama and all these other scumbags from the West. And Erdogan, this dictator that the United States media has defended, this man that has so much evidence that he's been involved with funding ISIS. And you know who tried to expose him? Serena Shim. And you need to look that up about Serena Shim if you don't know her already. Back in 2014, she was uncovering the truth about the Turkish connection to ISIS. It was actually, I think, September 17, 2014, they killed her. Those bastards killed her, a journalist. There's been a few times, actually, where there's been non-Western journalists that have been killed inside of Syria. And you wonder who's targeting these people, who's been targeting these journalists. It's one of those things. Serena Shim is one of those things. It's almost it's an unfortunate reality that they don't want Americans to know about. The fact is that she was killed for exposing the Turkish link to ISIS, and now you see Erdogan continuing. You know, they try to say that Erdogan tries to act like he's pro-Palestinian. He is one of the top 10 traitors of Israel. Erdogan is a liar. He's a dictator. He's shut off the internet in his country at times. And I know that also that his oppression of the Kurds is going on. And remember there was the United States supported another leader that oppressed the Kurds. You know what his name was? Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein also antagonized Iran, like Turkey does today. Turkey really likes to antagonize Syria, and Saddam Hussein had the United States support all the way to the point when he invaded Kuwait, and they gave him the green light to invade Kuwait, and then later they turned against him. But you know what they actually did? Is that they supported him gassing the Kurds, Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein he gassed the Kurds. He killed 5,000 of those people, and it was with United States support. That's the untold story about Saddam Hussein. And the untold story about Hitler is that he was supported by Wall Street bankers. So these people that you see a lot of times are textbooks that we're seem to be the clear good guys between Adolf Hitler and Saddam Hussein, but ultimately the United States government made these guys path to destruction and murder much more possible. The American people have been lied to so much on foreign policy. The American people have been lied to so much on who our government supports. Our government has been supporting terrorism. Our government has been supporting fascism across the world. Pinochet, Marcos, Suharto, Pak Chu-lee, actually Pak Chu-lee, Hey guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. Uh, that was my fault. My tablet. I had the thing chart plugged in, but I don't know, it just died on me. And then, but now I'm back. And I was saying is that the American people have been so lied to about the foreign policy of this country and what this country's been involved in, from supporting terrorism to supporting fascism. We've seen with Pinochet, Marcos, Park Chung-hee, or the Park Chung-lee, Suharto, Seco, Trujillo, Andres Perez, so many more dictators that the United States has been behind supporting. And, you know, there's all these many other ones that in Africa that are there today. And you don't hear anything about them. You don't hear about the horrible human rights abuses that they've been involved in. You don't hear about the ones in the Middle East. You don't hear about Bahrain. You don't hear about Qatar. You don't hear about Turkey. You hear positive things about Erdogan, but it's a lie. Erdogan is a dictator. And, you know, they try to make it seem like, well, he's just this poor, innocent guy that's being bullied by Russia. No, he's bullied the opposition of his country. He's led for 18 years as an iron fist, and the United States has supported him. The United States is also responsible for the many people that were killed by Pinochet in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. You also, Andres Perez killed so many people during the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. Andres Perez lived his life, his last years in exile, the former Venezuelan dictator. So they'll say that he was elected, and there was elections in Venezuela. But they had two parties that were very similar to each other. Like there's two parties that are very similar to each other right now here in the United States. But it keeps people in line, these show elections. And even when there's probably will be martial law in this country, there'll be show elections. And this country still believes that there's a democratic system, that they have a say, and that the super rich don't control this country. But the super rich do control this country, and that's why there must be a revolution. Revolution is the way forward out of this country's terrible debt, out of the horrible economic problems that this country has, out of our country sponsoring terrorists. Our country sponsored terrorists for the last 35 plus years. And they've tried to say it was for humanitarian reasons. They always say, "Oh, we're supporting these sketchy guys in the Middle East because these guys are these guys will take out the terrible dictator Assad. Oh, these guys will take out this guy or that guy, or that he'll take out these guys here will take out the pro-Soviet government in Afghanistan." That's what they said for people to get behind the support of the Mujahideen. Mujahideen are terrorists, were terrorists, and now there are many other splinter groups that have all crossed the Middle East. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Islamic Front. Afghanistan has become a backwards country oppressed by the by the terror groups that are now running this country, that is Afghanistan. And the Afghani people have been suffering for a long time, ever since the United States got involved with Afghanistan in the 80s or the 70s. Carter actually was the president then. And that's to the people that say Carter was different. Carter was different than the other presidents. Carter was the same. And he did the same, and he also helped, also during his time as president, he negotiated that deal between Israel and Egypt. And he actually, Carter, you might talk about Palestine now, but during president he did the same thing that every president does. And the last president actually to stand up to Israel was JFK. He stood up to the Israelis' illegal nuclear weapons program. And they're not part of the non-proliferation treaty. For those who don't know, Iran is not the ones that built the first illegal nuclear weapons program in the Middle East. And they never built an illegal nuclear weapons program because what they've been working on is their nuclear energy program. And if they even built a nuclear weapons program, they would have a lot of reason to when a country that has talked about wiping them out is right there. The Americans have talked about wiping them out. You know, there has to be a deterrent to stop these imperialist invasions. And sometimes countries result to that. You know, North Korea would have been wiped out a long time ago, probably, if it wasn't for the nuclear weapons there. And I think that Iran is actually, they don't have a serious deterrent because the Russians stopping the United States invasion, the United States kind of know that the Russians are going to show a lot of restraint because the Russians don't want to get involved in a war with the United States. The Russians have been involved in the war with Nazi Germany, and they don't want to get involved in another huge war. I would say that also the Russian government's very cautious. The Russian government's is very against war, and when they have been involved in wars, they've been involved for a very short time, like what happened with the Georgian War, where they were there for 6 days, eliminated the targets, and now Saakashvili, he's ran to Ukraine, the former Georgian madman that used to run Georgia, and talk about Georgia. Georgia's not Georgia the state of the United States, but Georgia the country over there in East Europe. Georgia is had a little war in 2008 between Russia and Georgia, and Russia was trying to protect these people that were trying to split away from the country, kind of like what Ukraine is going on. What's going on in Ukraine now? Ukraine has a lot of West Ukraine is now starting to get more momentum against them, or more people are starting to find out what they're doing. But we need, as people, we need to express to our friends, we need to talk to our family, we need to say what's going on in this country. And what is happening in Ukraine is similar to the atrocities committed in Kosovo, Serbia, and Bosnia during the Yugoslavia when NATO intervened, and well, it's not quite that, but when NATO intervened and bombed those countries. Now they haven't done that, but the West Ukraine has done a lot of terrible things to East Ukrainian people, and the United States is backing the West Ukrainians' actions in East Ukraine. The East Ukraine are not; these people are not terrorists. These are people fighting for their families, fighting for the homeland. Just like that, we talk about all the time how about the people that fought against the fascists in World War II. These people are fighting against the fascists of today. They idol, you know, we have all these movies over and over again about the war against Nazi Germany back in the 40s. But the war that's going on against the fascist government in Ukraine, they're calling those people terrorists. And wow, we're already at 10:50, and I actually. I was actually when a lot of the stuff was unfolding, I was in two of the pro Vladimir Putin groups on Facebook, and it's kind of weird to think that after all that time this is still going on. You know, something that should have been resolved a while ago. This is a conflict that still continues to affect their lives, and I think. I think that the Ukrainian people there'll be eventually some kind of solution. I hope it's not the country being divided into two. I hope they don't become another East Germany scenario. I hope the Kiev wall is never built. And I hope Poroshenko doesn't stay in power. But I hope that Ukraine unifies again one day with Poroshenko out. And actually a democratically elected government, not a coup government, like what came about in February 2014. And all these riots that happened before it. You know, there was a lot of chaos that led up to the Poroshenko government coming up into power, and then the election that happened in May of 2014, where the oligarch won and became the president of Ukraine. And now we have in East Ukraine, they've been fighting ever since March of 2014 to become independent. And they talk about the Russians. The Russians supposedly invaded and took Crimea. But the people of they did. They came. Well, they did and came in to protect the people that are 65% ethnically Russian. They voted 96% to become part of Russia. They did not want to be part of Ukraine. Those people did not want to be part of Ukraine. They don't have a lot of connections to Ukraine. They have a lot of connections to Russia. I have a few Facebook friends over there in Ukraine, and they pretty much say what I have to say. We have a few minutes left on the show, so I want everybody tonight to check out the Novorossiya Humanitarian Battalion with Sergei Bardashov running it. I'll give him a nice shout out for tonight. I'll also tell you guys to check out For Rus, who covers a lot of the events that's going on in Ukraine, and they cover a lot of stuff, because they're specifically towards East European events. They don't really cover stuff that's going on in Latin America. They don't really cover stuff that's going on in Africa, but they cover what's going on there. So they get a lot of very specific stuff about what's going on in East Ukraine. And if you want some more knowledge about what's going on in Syria, and it's like they cover, as the battles are going on, like they'll tell you the battle's going on today over in this part or whatever. Syrian Arab Army, they have a Facebook page. It's not the official Facebook page, but it's ran by people that know what's going on, obviously, over there. I think it's ran by fans. The Syrian Arab Army does have a Facebook page, but it's in Arabic. And you could translate everything over. That is true, but in Arabic, it's easier for just to look at the Syrian Arab Army Facebook page that's ran by fans. There's just some things to check out, widen your news perspective of what's going on around the world rather than relying on the mainstream media, which, as we've seen, their attempts to show that they're not complete bullshit is getting more and more extreme. And I think that they're losing. They're losing the information war. As Hillary Clinton admitted, is that they're losing the information war. And more people are going to RT. More people are going to Sputnik. A lot more people are going to us people like here at the UCY radio. I mean, we're all part. They eventually want to get rid of us, the alternative media. But we're a big force. The alternative media is a force of, it's the people wanting to get the truth about these situations, not getting the same regurgitated crap from the State Department. And the propaganda goes as far, not just the mainstream media, but our movies. Hollywood, it has a lot of influence coming from Zionists. We have like movies like Don't Mess with Zohan, where they show this like Mossad guy to be like a superhero of all kinds of superhuman feats. But the truth is that they show what the Mossad's really about, and the Mossad's about murders. They're about assassinations. They're about false flags. The Mossad is a very creepy, a very secretive intelligence services, and a very corrupt intelligence services that's involved in trouble all around the world. And Mossad is nefarious. I hear. I didn't even know what Mossad was actually until my Palestinian friend Muhammad actually showed me. And I actually didn't know him off of Facebook. I knew him from high school. There was one of the two. I knew two Palestinians, and Muhammad and Allah, and those are actually their names actually. Muhammad and Allah. We talked a little bit about Palestine, and Muhammad told me about the about what Mossad was, and once you look into what Mossad's about, it's really you really go down the rabbit hole of what these things these elites do, and you see that the Mossad has been behind. They had their involvement in 9/11 with the white vans going around New York City that day. In East Ukraine, what they have is it's actually you have the West Ukrainian military going over there and killing civilians. You have the West Ukrainian Special Forces killing civilians. They're like the Mossad there, is that they're doing the high-level missions, and they've been killing people like Motorola that they killed not that long ago. By the way, rest in peace, Motorola, who was a famous East Ukrainian commander. The West Ukrainian special forces are going and killing people. They're the West Ukrainian military is killing people. The West Ukrainian special forces is killing people, and they're the Mossad of this all. They're the assassins there, and doing and they've taken out the high level targets. But the thing is that the people of East Ukraine won't be beaten down. The people of Ukraine in general, as now the West Ukrainians no longer just have the people in two regions, Lugansk and Donetsk against them. They have the people of all across Ukraine are starting to rise up against them in the streets. These people screaming against Euromaidan. People say, we will not be silent. We're not going to stay silent to the coup. We're not going to be silent as democracy was thwarted against us. Democracy, as we know it, was democracy was cheated. And the West Ukrainian military killing people, the West Ukrainian special forces killing people and assassinating people, but all that stuff, the East Ukrainians have decided they have God on their side. They have good on their side. And the people of the East Ukraine are strong. They're like the Palestinian people. These proud fighters in the Donbass will keep fighting. And what we can do here is maybe we can't fight with arms, but we can fight with our words. We can fight and we can support the people that fight with arms over there. Not just East Ukrainians, but the volunteers from Spain, and even there's an American volunteer that's over there in East Ukraine. Like they volunteered in the Spanish Civil War against fascism. People are volunteering in this war against fascism, and they have the proud fighters there in East Ukraine that are fighting for their homeland. Everyone who tuned in, thanks for tuning in tonight. And
point of no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights, when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return. And if I back down